Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Heartstopper on Netflix. Let's talk about it. So Heartstopper is a Netflix series that is based off of the graphic novels by Imogen, and this series centers on the character of Charlie, who is this, I think, 15-year-old high school kid who is gay. He is now openly gay after coming out last year, I believe, last school year, and he has faced some backlash because of that, unfortunately, where his classmates have been bullying him and making his life miserable. Boo! But here in this new school year, we see him pursuing a relationship with Nick, who is in this interesting phase of his life where he is trying to figure out his own sexuality because of his feelings towards Charlie. And so we meet these two characters in this series and immediately fall in love with them because they are exceptional. And I have to make it very, very clear right from the jump that this series was superb. This series was a huge W for Netflix in a week that apparently they needed it the most. They needed that W, okay? But this series was just absolutely phenomenal for so many reasons. I'm so excited to get into my thoughts on this one. But before we delve into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter. I was live tweeting my reaction to the last few episodes of the series last night, so if you want to catch me live tweeting some other shows or movies, you can go ahead and follow me on there. Now without further ado, guys, let's get into my thoughts on Heartstopper. So first things first, yes, this is a teenage rom-com dramedy series that focuses on LGBTQ characters. We love to see it. I absolutely love the direction that media is heading towards, especially in the TV space, where we're getting more and more representation for LGBTQ characters. I think that is so fundamentally important to have that representation there, showing people from all different walks of life and experiences, and allowing audience members who see these shows and see these projects to feel like they're being seen and being heard. That is crucial. That is crucial, especially in today's space where there are so many TV shows coming out left, right and center in these streaming wars. There is no excuse for studios to not produce this kind of content, and I love the fact that Netflix is embracing that and giving us something that is truly important and also well done. Also well made. And actually, this isn't Netflix's first foray into this genre, because if you've been around for a minute, okay, if you watch my best TV shows of 2021 video, you'll know that a very similar series that I absolutely adored from last year featured in that video. And that series was called Young Royals. That time around, there was this kind of added twist where the main character was a prince. He was a Swedish prince. But if you enjoyed Heartstopper as much as I did, I would highly recommend you check out Young Royals, also on Netflix, which delves into these similar themes, but on top of that has that aspect of royalty and this kind of class struggle. Going back to Heartstopper and the theme of LGBTQ representation, I think another thing to note here is that yes, this series is full of teenage angst, guys. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm no longer a teenager. I know it's really hard for you to tell, but like, I'm not 15, so I could definitely see the teenage angst like overflowing from the script and every single scene that we got on this show. And you know, it's tough for me to get into teenage shows nowadays because of all the angst. Like, I can't really relate anymore. But I do think that this series does a good job of balancing that angst and the yearning and the insecurity and the texting and looking at the bubble. Oh my god, the bubbles with the 3 dots, okay? It balances all of that out with these genuinely heartwarming, just lovable and earnest moments between these characters. And I think that is so important, especially in this landscape where literally recently in my Killing Eve review, I mentioned how there was this issue of LGBTQ representation where, you know, LGBTQ characters weren't allowed to be happy on screen. They weren't allowed to show the love and affection and devotion towards their chosen partners on screen for very long before they were dispensed of. And that was something that a lot of people noticed and were really disappointed by. And I feel like this series, it definitely has its ups and downs and its flows and ebbs in terms of, you know, the relationships that are depicted on screen, because we do need to have some sort of conflict. In the end, this series isn't about depicting suffering, pain and rejection in this community. It's about celebrating these relationships and acknowledging that there are definitely difficulties along the way, but it's all worth it in the end. And I think that is such a beautiful and earnest message to have, especially in a teen drama. Another thing that I wanted to note is that this is a British TV series. It's based in the UK, and those of you who have watched my review of Sex Education will know that I absolutely love British productions that focus on the teenage experience. I tend to find them a lot more authentic as opposed to the Hollywood productions that to me feel very inauthentic and fake and airbrushed with these older actors who look stunning. They're the apex of, you know, conventional beauty, and they're supposed to be depicting these awkward teenagers, but in reality it's just an experience that is so devoid from the truth. So I tend to feel like British TV series, and honestly most shows made outside of Hollywood, like for example Young Royals, which was a Swedish show, I feel like those series show a much more relatable and authentic version of teenage experiences as opposed to the shows coming out of Hollywood that just feel very fake. It certainly helps that in Heartstopper we have actors who look age appropriate and everyone's wearing uniforms, which is typical here in the UK. But even when they're not wearing uniforms, they're wearing clothes that actual 15 to 16-year-olds would wear. Like, it just bothers me so much when you have American shows that over-sexualize kids, because that's what they are, children, and you have them being portrayed by actors who are like 30 years old and look super ripped and hot and, you know, conventionally attractive. And that's something that shows like Heartstopper, Sex Education, Young Royals avoids. You know, not to say that the actors look bad, but they look like the average person, and it makes it more believable when you're watching a series about the teenage experience. Okay, so now it's time to get into the good stuff. Now it's time to get into my thoughts on each of these characters, and we're gonna start off with Charlie. So Charlie is the main guy of the series. He is the first character that we're introduced to, and like I said, he actually came out to the whole school in the previous school year and was met with bullying and taunting. It really isn't a supportive environment for the LGBT community in the schools that they go to, which is really sad and unfortunate, but also reflects the reality of a lot of people's experiences, unfortunately. But we have Charlie, who is this kind of more nerdy guy, and at the beginning of the series he is unfortunately wrapped up in this relationship, like situationship with Ben. We'll talk about Ben in a second, okay? But Charlie is really down bad at the beginning of this series, and I completely understand where the character is coming from. After having been bullied all year that previous year when everyone found out that he was gay, and being forced to eat lunches and hide out in the maths room, I think it is, the maths classroom, with his maths teacher, who is another member of the LGBTQ community. I believe he's gay. He's the only person that he's been able to confide in, because everyone else has just been so unsupportive apart from his friends. And so of course when he finds one other person who's like him and can relate to his experience as a young gay boy, he would latch on to that person, even though that person is trash as hell, even though that person is never seeing the golden gates of heaven ever. Ben sucks so much. We'll talk about Ben, like I said, in a moment. But yeah, I completely understand where Charlie is coming from. His self-esteem must have been in the gutter, and it's because of the environment that he was in. But then of course we have his knight in shining armor swooping in and saving him from the evil clutches of Ben, and that is Nick. Oh my goodness, Nick has my whole Nick, listen, Charlie must be protected at all costs. I know the internet always says this, like, no, but really, Charlie must be protected at all costs. But if there's anyone who can do the job, because I'm not on the show, you see, if there's anyone who can do the job, it's Nick. My guy Nick, listen, I was rooting for them so much. I felt like I was both of their older sisters whilst watching this show. Like, I want nothing but the best for you both. So on the flip side of things, we have the character of Nick, who is actually a year older. He's actually in year 11, which means he'll be moving soon. But anyway, we'll deal with that in the next season. But what I love about this series is that first and foremost, Nick is introduced as a nice guy. Like, he's introduced as a nice person who's friendly towards Charlie, doesn't bully him like the rest of the school, boo, and just treats him like a human being. And they seem to have like a genuine connection first and foremost before we get into the more romantic aspects of their relationship. And I really enjoyed that. And that scene at the beginning where he's like covered in ink he comes back to Charlie and he's like, oh, my pen seems to have exploded. That is hilarious. How did that happen? How did that happen? Nick, you goof. Yeah, so Nick is supposed to be this like jock, but again, because it's not playing off of like American stereotypes of teenagehood, he's like a rugby player, but he's not some like, you know, super masculine, you know, super adult and bro-y kind of character. Like, he's a rugby player and everyone else kind of holds him in high regard because of that, but it's not to the extreme that we would see in American TV shows. But still, even though he is part of that pact of rugby players, like I said, he is a decent human being at his core first and foremost, which I really appreciate about the character. And at the beginning of the series, you know, you can tell that there's something there between Nick and Charlie, but they do take their time in exploring the friendship that exists first and foremost. And obviously Charlie's like head over heels for him, obviously, but Nick is taking more time to really understand his feelings towards Charlie, and the series does a great job of exploring that as well. Now, the big moment that really sets up Nick as Charlie's knight in shining armor is when Charlie is having a talk with Ben, who's treating Charlie like crap, like actual crap, and it drove me absolutely insane, but I couldn't get in the show, so someone needed to step in instead. And here comes Nick. You know, he was listening in on the whole conversation. I love the fact that he was eavesdropping shamelessly, and he manages to stand up to Ben on Charlie's behalf. And at this point in time, Charlie is under the impression that he is just a really supportive straight friend. Little do we know, but yeah, at this point in time, he's just shown to be a great ally and someone who stands up for the right thing, and again, proving himself to be just a much better person than the majority of the population of that school. I would say that the way that the series handles Charlie and Nick's relationship is really interesting, because there are a lot of booby traps here, okay? Because of the unfortunate track record when it comes to the representation of LGBTQ relationships in media, there were a lot of booby traps that this series could have fallen into that would have made them, you know, a part of a long-standing tradition of terrible representation. But I do think for the most part that this series does a great job of dodging a lot of those booby traps, because booby trap number one was when Nick wanted to keep his and Charlie's relationship a secret. Now, like I said, Charlie was in a very vulnerable position at this time because he had just gotten out of that toxic relationship that he had with Ben, but he had latched onto Ben because he literally had no one else. No one else was taking interest in him, so he was prone, you know, he was putty in Ben's hands because of the ill treatment that he had gotten from the rest of the school. But then he sees someone like Nick who actually stood up to him, who actually sees him as a human being and treats him well and has a nice time with him, and obviously he has a crush on him anyway, so he is again vulnerable to just going along with what Nick says, not to mention the fact that Nick is a year older. And so we see at the beginning there that the relationship between Nick and Charlie, whilst it definitely isn't as toxic as what we saw with Ben, Ben, because he's literally below the gutter in terms of standards, but we see that there are some similarities. Like, we see that there aren't actually as many differences as we would like for Charlie and for his mental health. And then ultimately we see how much of a toll it takes on him, having that responsibility to keep Nick's secret, along with Charlie feeling like just by being associated with him, Nick's reputation in the school is being tarnished. Not that that should matter, but in their environment it clearly does, especially considering Nick's friendship group. So all of that is playing on Charlie's mind, and he is just ready and willing to go with whatever arrangement their relationship should take. But the difference once again between Ben and Nick is that Nick doesn't suck. Nick doesn't suck, and he is kind of cognizant of the toll that this is taking on Charlie, and he knows that this isn't the right thing to do. Like, at some point, I can't remember which episode it is, but he does say like this should not be something they should have to keep a secret. Like, he feels bad about the fact that he has asked Charlie to take this burden on. And again, that's the difference between the two characters. Now, the next booby trap that this series avoids when it comes to Nick and Charlie's relationship is that Nick never tries to isolate Charlie from his friends. I love that about him. Even though he knows that some of his friends aren't fans of his, he understands why, and he still tries to integrate himself into Charlie's friendship group. That was just so endearing. That was just so lovable, because even though Tao, okay, Tao makes it very clear that he is not Nick's #1 fan, but Nick tries to, you know, level with him and tries to understand where Tao is coming from. And I think that's really important, because these are the very few people in Charlie's life who have actually been supportive of him, who have been by his side during this difficult moment. And so Nick accepts that, and he realizes that, and he wants to be a part of their circle rather than trying to isolate Charlie from them. And I just think, again, it speaks volumes about the kind of character that he is and how largely he contrasts with Ben. And then on the flip side of things, another booby trap that this series avoids is when it comes to Nick's friendship group and how they interact with Charlie, because Nick's friendship group is toxic as hell. There's some more rugby boys, okay? They're the rugby team of the school, the jocks, if you will. But like I said, it's a British series, so it's not made to be like they're gods in the school or anything. Obviously, they're the top of the food chain, but the food chain isn't as vicious as what you would see in America. So they're the rugby lads who are led by Harry. Harry is yet another character who is never seeing the Golden Gates. I swear to God, we will talk about Harry later, but they are led by him, and you can see that there is a lot of toxicity in the culture of that group. They're embracing a lot of the homophobic views of their pack leader. And in the case of some of them, as Nick himself says, they may be nice people behind the scenes or individually, but when they're all together in this group, they co-sign a lot of Harry's behavior. And that's what makes it worse, is that when you have this group, some people might not even agree with what Harry is saying, but they stand there and do nothing. They're just bystanders in these interactions, and it just makes them as bad as he is. What's great about this series is that it doesn't fall into the trap of having Nick also act like his friends when Charlie is around, because Charlie does join the rugby team because he's a great runner. He's been great at running, and it also gives the show great opportunities to have Charlie and Nick bonding over their rugby skills, right? But you have Nick, you know, showing Charlie the ropes when it comes to rugby, and then of course the rest of the rugby team, you know, who know that Charlie is gay because he was outed the previous year, are mocking him and constantly making these jokes about him, and then when he's upset by them, they gaslight him into thinking it's not a big deal. Just typical bully homophobic behavior. It's just trash. What I liked about this series is that Nick was never a part of that, because the second that he crossed that line, I'm sorry, but he would have been irredeemable. And a lot of shows in the past have tried to do that, where it's like, oh, the character will join in with the bullying, with the mockery, but then in the end we're supposed to forgive that character because he sees the light, has a coming to Jesus moment. But in this series, Nick never stooped that low. Nick never stooped that low, and that was the difference between him and than Ben, and so that's why we're rooting for him. He was always a good guy, and I appreciate that about the character and the show. And another thing that I appreciate about the series is that Nick isn't just the love interest in this show. He actually has his own character arc because he is going through a period of self-discovery himself. He is trying to figure things out when it comes to his sexuality, especially in light of his feelings towards Charlie, and he comes to realize that he is bisexual. And I absolutely loved the scenes where he was like going on the internet and was like, is I gay? Like, is I gay? Gay I am. Like, it reminded me of the scenes in like Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think it was. Where Peter Parker was just looking up like things about his dad. Anyways, any scenes where the characters like googling stuff just makes me laugh. But it was a really significant character arc that he went through, where he was coming to terms with his sexuality. I love the fact that this series tried to do its part in terms of stopping this bi erasure, where you have him acknowledging the fact that he still finds Keira Knightley hot. Like, he's still like, he's still down with the girls, but maybe he's down for both, and that's perfectly okay. And then this story arc culminates in the scene at the end of the series between him and his mother, who is inexplicably played by Olivia Colman. I love the fact that she's on this show. I love the fact that, like, it makes no sense, like, Olivia Colman, but she's on the show and it's great. It's just a benefit to the series. You get the scene at the very end where he comes out to his mum, and it was just all tears from there. I don't know about you guys, I couldn't see a thing. I said on Twitter that this scene may as well have just been audio because I couldn't see a thing through my tears, and I wasn't lying. I was, ooh. When he comes out to his mom, my sweet little carrot top, when he comes out to his mom, I was like so emotional. What a beautiful, beautiful moment. And I love his mother's reaction, where it was just acceptance and love, and she just hugged him. Like, we don't need to see suffering. We don't need to see pain all the time, even though it may be the case in reality for a lot of people, but it is just so hopeful and optimistic to also see a family member who is just loving and accepting towards this person. And even though she doesn't dismiss this, she acknowledges how important it is, and she shows just how grateful she is that he would share that information with her, but it doesn't change her relationship with him, which I think is just so crucial. Ah, what a beautiful moment to end this series on. Okay, so I've spent the majority of this time talking about Nick and Charlie because they are the moment, but there are some other characters on the series. Okay, so let's touch on them for a second. First of all, let's talk about the bullies. Okay, I've been hinting about my rants over these bullies for a minute now, so let's just get this over with, shall we? First of all, Harry sucks. Harry sucks. Harry, listen, I don't want to be the adult, the grown adult who's, you know, going off on a kid, on a child underage character from a TV show. So I'm not gonna say that Harry is going to hell. No, I'm just gonna say that should Harry want to see the Golden Gates, he has a lot of work to do from now until Judgment Day. That's what I'm gonna say on Harry, because that guy is truly despicable. When the F word left his lips, I was like, it's, ooh, hands are about to be thrown. And I was so glad that Nick actually went there. He was like, no, boom. I love that. I was living vicariously through Nick in that moment, because I can't be the one to punch Harry in the face. He's a child. So I'm glad that Nick did that for me. And secondly, and this might be something that only fellow Brits notice, but Harry has like a British version of like a black scent. Inexplicably, it's not really a black scent, but it's just like he sounds like he's from the ends, like he sounds like he's from the hood or the ghetto or whatever, even though he isn't, because like he's a spoiled little rich white boy. It makes no sense. It's giving he's trying too hard. It's giving he's a poser. It's giving cultural appropriation. And also, his accent reminded me of, oh, this is such a deep cut, but if anyone has seen Some Girls from BBC, the character of Rocky, okay, for the two people who are watching this and have watched Some Girls, you know what I'm talking about. It's giving trying to be Rocky, is what it's giving. And then next up we have Ben, who similarly has a lot of work to do if he ever wants to see the Golden Gates. I would say that I have a smidgen a smidgen more empathy for Ben, just because he is a gay boy who is trying to figure things out. And even though he's not acting in the best way at the moment, like he literally sucks and is treating Charlie poorly, at least it's coming from a place of like insecurity. He has to figure things out for himself. You know, he has a journey to go on himself. So maybe I can understand just a little bit. I can empathize with the character a little bit, but still he sucks. He still sucks though, don't get me wrong, and he has a lot of work to do. Okay, so next up we have Tao. Oh, this might be a little bit controversial, you know. Tao annoyed me. Okay, we'll start off with the good with Tao. I like the fact that Tao was just such a great defender of Charlie. I like the fact that he didn't take any crap from Harry and his goons. I loved his comebacks as well. They were so clever. He was so on it when it came to the comebacks. I loved his devotion and his dedication to his friendship group. Like, I really appreciated these aspects of the character. But I do think that sometimes his insecurities got the better of him, and he became a little bit unlikable and unbearable in how he wanted to force everyone to stay together. Like, he just wanted everything to stay the same as it was last year. He wasn't handling the changes in his life and especially in his friendship group very well, and it came across as very aggro. Like, it came across as a bit much, especially when it came to Charlie trying to pursue something with Nick. I do understand that in Tao's eyes, Nick was no different to Ben, so that's why he didn't warm up to him. But I just wish that he had given Charlie a little bit more wiggle room to figure things out and to make mistakes and to be there for him when or if those mistakes were to happen, as opposed to trying to prevent Charlie from exploring anything at all. And then just in general, when it came to Charlie pursuing friendships with other people, you know, when he became a part of the rugby team, Tao was really against that as well. And even just with Elle, you know, trying to get Elle to just stay a part of that friendship group and not stray too far from the group, it just seemed a little bit obsessive. And it annoyed me a little bit when I was watching the series, even though, like I said, I did understand where he was coming from. And speaking of the beautiful Elle, let's talk about this character for a second here, because she is this young trans girl in the show who is going through a, you know, difficult time because she just moved out of the boys' grammar school and she now moved to an all-girls school, and she's just trying to figure that out. It's a different dynamic, obviously coming from the boys' school where she had a lot of flack as well. She was bullied at that school as well. Like I said, it's a toxic environment, and so she's moved to a new school, but she hasn't really made any friends, and it's not really because of the same level of toxicity, but mostly because she's been keeping to herself, because, you know, when you're moving to a new school in the middle of the year, it's a difficult time all around. She does eventually manage to make friends with Tara and Darcy, who are this cute little couple in the school, and they're able to relate to each other because they are all part of the LGBTQ community as well, but also because Elle finally opens up to starting a friendship with Tara and Darcy, and she sees that she's met with, you know, open arms, and that's just a really nice experience for her, and she no longer feels as alone in the school. But at the same time, she also has some, you know, unresolved feelings, unresolved issues with the gang that she left behind in the boys' school, because she may or may not have feelings towards Tao. By the end of the series, I think she settles on Tao just being a friend, which I actually think is very refreshing. I actually think that's great for her, because there is this like consistent theme of LGBTQ characters falling for straight people, and I like the fact that she ultimately came to the conclusion that she just sees him as a friend, and that's perfectly okay. So I really like the exploration of this character. She doesn't get a lot of screen time, but I think the screen time that she does get is very meaningful and impactful, and again, it's so important to have that kind of representation, especially in a teen drama where you have this younger trans girl as a part of this story. And finally, we have Tara and Darcy. I also wanted to touch on their relationship. I think it's really interesting because here, through the character of Tara, Tara. First of all, we have the kind of confirmation that Nick needed when it came to realizing that he was bisexual, because he acknowledges that he was genuinely attracted to Tara when they were younger, but at the same time he also really likes Charlie in that way. So that's just kind of the confirmation that he needs. At the same time, you know, Nick himself was confirmation to Tara that she was a lesbian. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. She's like, yeah, I knew from the second that I kissed you that something was up. I did find it really interesting to see how, you know, when they were out, you know, when Tara posted those pictures of them at the party on Instagram, and people realized that they were in a lesbian relationship, it wasn't all, you know, sunshine and roses for her. She was struggling with the comments that people were making, the way that people were treating her. Like, either people were bullies and they were making these snide comments, or some people were calling them brave and like just being artificial and weird around them. And she was really struggling with these reactions, and she was verbalizing that, especially to Charlie, you know, reflecting on his experiences. And she was saying, you know, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. You know, sometimes people react in weird ways and it takes a toll on you. And I like the fact that the series doesn't try to hide away from that. Like, it really tried to give a voice to people with those experiences, because I think Tara's reaction was valid. And I also really love the way that her friendship group, her extended friendship group now, because Elle has brought in her old gang, they kind of came around her and supported her. And obviously Darcy was by her side the whole time, you know, listening to her concerns. That was just really, really nice, refreshing, insightful, and just really healthy ultimately. And also, I know I just said that Tara and Darcy would be the last ones, but I did just want to touch on my sis Imogen. Imogen, oh, the straight girls were down bad. Listen, Imogen had this massive crush on Nick, and like, it was so obvious. It was so obvious, the poor thing. It became clear that Nick wasn't interested in her, even though he is bisexual, but like, she's just not doing it for him. And not to mention, he's in a relationship with Charlie anyways. But I like the fact that she kind of accepted that it was time to back off. And also, I find it so funny, and this time not humorously, I find it so funny how Harry was opening his mouth, talking out of his neck, being like, oh Nick, why don't you never hang out with girls? Like, what's going on there? Are you gay? Blah, 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 blah. Where in reality, I never saw Harry hang out with one single female. One single female. Harry had the audacity to mock Nick for not having a girlfriend when he himself was on his ones. Imagine the audacity. That literally only comes with being a spoiled straight white boy. Yes, it does. Yes, it absolutely does. So obviously, guys, I had a great time with this series. Oh, I thought it was just so amazing. It was so heartwarming. I enjoyed it from start to finish. And I think it's amazing that young people, especially teenagers nowadays, get to have this kind of, you know, teenage experience being explored in television. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Heartstopper a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Heartstopper, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch you videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.